You've heard already from the other speakers about the changing market requirements out there. You've heard an international perspective too in terms of some of the innovative things that are going on. Plus you've heard about some of the exciting work that's going on that Ed's been involved with many of the people in this room to help increase genetic gain and so on and so forth. So ultimately, whichever way you look at this, and all of the topics that we've talked about today, it's all relying on using data, or as Tim says, data. And I don't want to abuse this hippopotamus image, but if I can just change it and present you with a nursery rhyme, which goes along the lines of, Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was as white as snow, and everywhere Mary went, the lamb was sure to go. Well, if you think about today, and what we do as sheep breeders, ultimately you have to think very carefully about who needs to know about that lamb, and also what data you need to collect on it. The Breed Society will want to know when it was born, who its mummy and daddy were. Equally, if white fleece is important to your marketplace, you need to start to record that. That's more data. Plus the fact, if the lamb really does follow Mary everywhere, you'll probably need to do a movement for it as well. So you'll need to, you'll need to record the ear tag number. But every pedigree breeder collects data in some form. Some of it electronically, some of it on paper. At its most basic level, it's parentage information. And at the most advanced level, it can be CT scanning information, which is used obviously then. Those facts are then used to produce information, and as you can see on here, there are things that you will recognise, be it pedigree certificates or be it breeding values. Every research project obviously is very important in terms of producing data, and that serves and feeds into the information that's produced. This information, though, provides you with knowledge, and that knowledge is what you can then apply context to in your business. And that knowledge then helps you make decisions, and those decisions will hopefully impact on profit. This is why the Society has developed its database. But what I'd like to do is just take a big step back now to understand a little bit more. So if we go back to 2005, when the Texel Society was one of the founding shareholders in Basco, along with the Limousin Cattle Society and the Suffolk Sheep Society. The objective at that time was to provide a shared database service, something which was quite innovative in its time, and that was achieved. Essentially, it was to provide purely and simply that, a shared database and a publication. All those years ago, life was simple. And I'm sure if we fast forward to today, you can appreciate from some of the things that you've heard in this room today, you're probably thinking this sounds quite complicated. But what I'd like to do, obviously it's getting towards the end of the day, you've had lunch, you're probably feeling a bit sleepy. We've got Slido, but for those of you in the room that aren't participating with that, I'd like to ask you all a question. Who's heard of Basco here? If I could just have a show of hands. Look at that, excellent. And keep your hands up if you actually use it. Fantastic. Okay, thank you. I promise you that's the end of the audience participation. So if we fast forward 13 years to today, with all the complex things that are going on, all the new requirements, breeding objectives, data collection, etc., you can understand why life is more complicated. And ultimately, that is one of the reasons that's driven the Texel Society earlier this year to become the sole shareholder of Basco. This decision allows the Society to have the freedom to make the best decisions it can for the Texel breed. Working with other partners is great, but you have to sometimes limit your ambition based on the fact that everybody needs to be kept happy. So now, ultimately, we can now start to make investments to support our genetic and genomic evaluation services, plus additional new bolt-on services as we start to leverage disruptive technologies like the ones you've heard today, and in particular, genomics. So what are the challenges involved in delivering this knowledge into your hands? Well, We all know from the television we watch at home or the mobile phone that we have in our pocket just how quickly technology changes. And running a database service is no different. 14 years ago, everybody used to access Basco, or 13 years ago, through a fixed desktop PC. Very simple, very static. Today, everybody wants to access Basco through a mobile phone or another mobile device. The power of the information on Basco is such that there have been reported cases where animals have been stolen to order and the cellular data has been used in prosecutions to see and prove people were actually looking at information on those ear tag numbers. That's how powerful data is these days. But the current service has been delivered in a very cost-effective way, and obviously future developments need to continue along those lines. It's great having a database, but data collection by members is needed, and that must increase. And DEFRA at the moment is currently funding a scoping study that will, when complete, recommend innovation in sheep breeding to maximise genetic improvement, environmental gain and profitability on farm. But if the recommendations are implemented, it will all rely on data. And that data will need to be collected and it will need to be evaluated. And if it's collected, it will need to be stored somewhere, which will be in a database. So if I look across the membership today, there is a mix. A lot of data is collected. Some data is transferred to the society. A lot of data stays on farm. This is an area that we need to look at collectively. Finally, legislation and compliance are a big challenge. I'm sure all of you within business will be familiar with the 4 initials GDPR. This has placed new requirements on all businesses that are using any kind of data. Fines have increased, and the maximum fines now are £20 million or 4% of turnover. So there's a lot of regulatory compliance that needs to be very much front and centre of mind. However, despite these challenges, there are some fantastic opportunities. Simpler data collection is one, I believe, that is a massive opportunity for all to explore, perhaps via an app or via integrating with on-farm software to make collection of data far easier and submitting that into a database that can then be used to run evaluations. Additionally, I'm sure for many in the room, things such as simplifying the online birth notification for embryo lambs would be something that would be very welcome. Also, collection of other data of interest to members and put on by people in the iTexel office. So, for example, if we were to collect information about which animals have won which shows, which animals were sold for which price at different markets up and down the country and different sales. All of this can be built to use and to build a picture and present information that is of value to you as breeders. I know I spend enough time when the requirements from the entry forms come out for catalogues trying to remember which animals sold for which amount of money. It would be nice if a lot of that information could be pulled in from a database. And additionally, the online cataloguing of animals. That's something which I'm sure would be very welcome, as it would help to improve efficiency within the office. The publication of genomic evaluations is very clearly one that is a massive opportunity to increase the amount of information in your hands, along with enhanced reporting and analytics. Okay. Plus, also we've heard about what genomics can do in terms of assisting with mating. One of the areas, potentially we already have an inbreeding coefficient tool. If that was to be extended to perhaps say, well, actually I want to select for more growth this year, or more muscle, or more fat of whatever type, then that's all very possible. Also, there are huge benefits to be gained from sharing data too. One of the things Ed's touched on is the sharing of crossbred data, because when you share data, you get benefits flowing both ways. And with the right type of database, that is all very, very possible, and that all adds to the accuracy of the information provided. Okay, and ultimately, when you have that information, I think the really important thing is with data collection, you're collecting the data today and you're not actually sure with some of it what you can do with it. And it's not until you get 5 or 6 or 10 years down the road that you then have this massive pool of information you can start to be using and looking at. Great examples are some of the things Nicola touched on with looking at potentially things like lambing ease and using some of the information from the myriad of CT scanning information that there is. So the possibilities are pretty much limitless. You can think of your own things. So ultimately, when it comes down to it, why should you care? Well, simply put, having data and information published on your animals is your best marketing tool. Neil's touched on being more marketing orientated. That's come across in many of the other talks too. Your data is your greatest friend when it comes to that. Increasing numbers of posts on social media where people are advertising their animals for sale are referencing using the information on the Basco database to provide pedigree and performance information. And that will only increase as the years go by. Ultimately, one of the other things too is data provides proof to buyers, which breeds greater trust. It's a bit like having a badge of authenticity. And one of the things that we have seen is where, and Tim, with some of the analysis that he's done, has validated the fact that pedigree has a value. And that value is based on knowing the information and the authenticity of the animal. So, evaluations do provide very useful information. They are based on data, and that in turn builds this trust. It provides the additional ability for you to validate your product and maintain value in the eyes of your buyers. And Tim has talked about that as well. How are we doing for time?
1 minute.
Perfect. Okay. So, moving on. All this means that there is demonstrable evidence that we support Texel in delivering its massive industry impact. 23 million, again, is a figure that's been calculated by Abacus. So, in closing, as there's less than a minute now, I would like to summarise by saying that the Society and its membership heavily rely on having an effective database to support its current service delivery. And like it or not, we do live in an information age, and data can be your friend if you choose to use it. So thank you very much.